Hi, hello, and welcome to
Fascinatingly Odd,
Fantastically Queer, a podcast by
JK.
Darren. Today we've got a really special episode of the podcast. We're here with Camp YA or Camp Young Authors, and we're talking about books and queerness and just all that cool stuff. So my name's Darren. My pronouns are they, them. I am an LGBT advocate, I guess. I hate saying the word activist. It's a whole issue. I volunteer at different Pride organisations, and I've helped set up activist groups in the UK too. And I'm a queer journalist as well with that. JK, did you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Hi, JK. This is just a live podcast recording, so hold your breath. I'm JK. I'm the chair of Yeovil Pride. I've been involved with other prides, as has Darren. We met through Pride in London. My pronouns are he, him. I'm not quite as amazing as Darren. I'm the modest one. Darren's the opposite.
Wow, rude. I'm the pretty one too, so it's fine. I guess that was plays well to what you just said too. And today we've got a really special episode, and we're going to be talking about, like I just said, books and stuff. And we have a really amazing, awesome guest with us today. Nora, did you want to introduce yourself too?
Yes, please. Thank you, Darren. Hello, everybody. I'm Noria. I am a booktuber. I run a booktube channel where I talk about books, mostly my favorite books. So a lot of fantasy, a lot of science fiction, a couple of romances, and some contemporary. I'm Nigerian. I live in Nigeria. I'm bisexual, and my pronouns are she, her. So, hi.
Awesome. We're really excited to talk to you and get to know you and for this chat as well. So usually our first question that we typically have on the podcast is a location. Let's put our podcast on location based. What's a queer place that means something to you or is important to your queer journey? I think today for the theme, to switch it up a little bit too, a great question would be, what was a book maybe when you're growing up or something that inspired you and that was relevant to your queer journey?
Okay. In my case, though, it's funny because I was not one of the people that always knew that I wasn't straight. I live in a very heteronormative society that it's a given. For those that do not know, Nigeria still considers gay queer relationships illegal. So and I grew up in a family that didn't even have those conversations. So it took a while for me. I've always had the feelings, but I never really could identify them. And books have been very central to me. So it is a very interesting question. The first book when I actually realized that, one, it is possible for me not to be straight, and two, it is actually freaking awesome that I'm not, is because it's campaign. I'm going to the YA book, City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. And the reason is the book might not be my absolute favorite of the books that she's written, but that was the book that introduced me to Magnus Bane as a character, who is this bisexual warlock who is phenomenal and living his best life and so authentic in everything he does, and also is quite magical. And I remember reading that and being like, oh, and then, oh, so it was several layers of, oh, that is interesting, and when you meeting that character, reading about that character, falling in love with that character and that portrayal, had me asking questions, had me digging deeper, trying to figure out, okay, so you do realize that those feelings were not straight and this is not the heterosexual way to do things. And I was like, oh, so that is what I am. That is what I mean. So I would say City of Bones for bringing me Magnus Bane and for starting me on that journey of self-discovery would be very important. Yes.
That's so awesome. I've got a tattoo from the Mortal Instruments series, Fearless Ruin. So I loved Mortal Instruments, and yes, Magnus Bane was an amazing character. He was such like a fabulous queer bisexual character. I loved him. I hated Alec until like the last book. I fell in love with Alec in the last book when like he seemed to like embrace himself more in that last book. Like but like, the first like books, he was so like up himself and he was just so angry and stuff. In that last book, when he was like making all these like sassy jokes at like Alec, not Alec, Jace and Clary. I was just like, especially like the code and stuff. I was like, yes, finally. But yes,
I didn't realize that I had to read this book to be part of this discussion. My gosh, I need a like education here.
Well, it's a Netflix show as well. The Netflix show isn't as good as the books, and they never are, but it's not too bad. It's way better than the film. The film was so bad. I remember seeing the film in the cinema. I was like, oh no, this has ruined my tattoo. Like, what am I going to do? But like, it's fine. But yes, I agree with you on that one. What about you, JK? Do you have a book that kind of is like your clear away from?
I never read as a kid. Like, reading was something I came into much later. But young adult fiction has kind of been the place that I've re-identified and found my kind of home almost in a lot of fiction, whether that is actually young adult or whether that's kind of novels. Sally Rooney, I kind of really adore her. Kind of, they are normal stories in a way that just tells kind of it's awful to describe a book as bland, but I think it's just kind of a natural, and again a natural words are not with me today. The way that the language is talked, my god, they're going to think I'm an illiterate. But the story is just so pure and so kind of honest, and is a story. It's not truth. So I really do like those. I also love the work of John Green and his books like Looking for Alaska that take you on this whole journey about, they're not overtly queer, they're not overtly LGBT+, but they do have references and characters that do, I definitely identified through those as well. And obviously because of the Netflix, not Netflix, the Hulu series, Love Hector or whatever it is, I did love Simon. When I read the book, I loved it more than I loved the film. But that also kind of was a great piece of literature for me.
I think my one would be The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I remember reading that growing up and like crying my eyes out.
I cried days.
But like it's like in that book, like obviously there's Patrick, who is the queer character, but there's like so every character I feel like I could identify with in different ways, whether that was Charlie, Sam, or Patrick. So I think for me it was Perks of Being a Wallflower. Again, have a tattoo quote from that on my arm too. So yeah, books and stuff I think have been something that's always been big in my life. I think I did my undergrad was in creative writing and English literature, so like reading is something that I've always enjoyed doing too. JK, do you want to ask a question?
I think I will try and make this into a question, but I think literature is so important to do that, right? A lot of my education and how I see the world hasn't come through teaching. I've just been to a screening of a Pride documentary, and it talks about Section 28 in the UK, which stopped the promotion of homosexuality at school. Up until 2003, I was just going into secondary school and it was repealed, and the consequences of that legislation kind of, in like Darren and I's generation as UK people that have gone through the UK school system, it's definitely affected me. And so going into literature and being able to read those stories and identify myself in them has been kind of the education that I didn't have. And that's less of a question because I'm not very good at being put on the spot for questions. But I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? That literature, we find characters and we identify with them, and we become part of them, or they more aptly become part of us. That was not a question, and you're both like nodding in silence, like.
No. I think it's more of a case of agreeing with you, because I think that literature is a mirror. It's a mirror. I always compare it as being a mirror and a flashlight at the same time, right? It's a mirror in the sense that you hold it up against like your face, and then you see who you are, or who you could be, and what that stands for and what that means. And it's also a flash because also a way to discover, especially young adult literature. I think that's why it gets a lot of bad rep, and people forget that at the core of it, it's mostly about self-discovery. Young adult literature has always been that for us, for everybody. It's a case of being able to discover who you are, being able to discover what your dreams, what your hopes are, being able to find comfort and being able to find someone else who also is going through the same struggle you're going through. And I think a lot of people, they decry YA because they think, oh, YA is silly and young. And I'm just thinking, I'm like, at every point in your life, you're always discovering who you are. We change every couple of years, we evolve, we grow. So why wouldn't that be possible? Why can't that be appreciated? Why can't you see that reflection of the adult? But I guess when people think about literature for teenagers, especially adults, they're just like, oh, don't bring that to me. And I'm like, yo, we were all teenagers once, and we are all still learning. It's the great thing about being human, isn't it? To continually learn. So that's why we were nodding,
Literature
because we
does that thing as
absolutely
well.
agree
Like,
with you.
but it's true, and I agree with your point as well about like a literature being a mirror to us, and we see ourselves in the literature. I also think that it has the inverse as well, in this piece of showing that actually things can be better. They can be. There is a place to go, and there's that slogan of it gets better, and especially when you're pubescent and you're hormonal and you're going through all of these changes, trying to figure out who you are as a person so fundamentally, that YA does. There's no other kind of alternative to something like a YA novel, like whatever the subject matter, to show you who you are, but also where you can go.
And I guess following from that, what was your kind of like the first kind of books that you found that like you really really liked, just in general? Like what are your favorite books?
Is that for me?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
You're the guest, but I want to speak.
Jacob, do you want to go first? Okay. So the very first set of books I remember reading and loving were actually the very first set of books I ever got. My stepfather got me a collection of fairy tales. In this cute little purse, and they were hardbacks, but in this cute little purse, I took it everywhere. He had just newly married my mom, and I guess he just noticed that I looked lost and felt that books have always been something that grounded him and also comforted him, so he gave me books, and that was it. So I have a particular fondness for fairy tales. I love them. I also love all the various retellings and reiterations that that exist from fairy tales. I also read a lot of fantasy really young, so that is probably why I love that genre so much, because I've been reading it since I was 7, 8. Although when I started, I read a lot of Enid Blyton, which is funny because Nigerians, like, that was currency when I was in primary school. We read a lot of it. So Magic Faraway Tree, Wishing Chair, we're reading everything. And then of course the school-based stories of St. Clair's Maluta's, not Tess Garland School. And then secondary school, I started reading a lot of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. So I guess even when I was younger, and the books I really enjoyed were ones that had magic in it, were ones that had young children and teenagers, that whom I could relate with. I also, of course, read some of my mom's like older books that I absolutely should not have been reading at that age. I don't know why. I don't know why my mom did not notice. Like, yo, 11-year-old is too young to be reading Janet Daly, but I was reading Janet Daly at 11. And I think back and I'm just like, no, you shouldn't have been reading those books. But I guess that's the whole thing, though. The act of self-censoring yourself. Looking back, you're like, oh, you shouldn't have read that book. But then I'm like, is there any book that we read that is not important in contributing to who we are in present day? And if you tell me that, oh, if you do not read that Janet Daly book, you will not be the Noria that you are today, I will be, give me all the Janet Dailies, because I'm actually pretty fond of who I am today. So yeah, those were the first set of books I read when I was really young and I enjoyed.
Just to butt in, I have to now send my apologies. I inconveniently planned the whole of Yeovil Pride to coincide with Camp YA, and it's something that I'm truly sorry for. But we're hosting a virtual Pride, so I am due on another call in about 5 minutes' time. But thank you so much for coming on, and I'm sure we will catch up soon. And leave you in Darren's capable hands. Thank you.
Bye, JK.
Bye, JK. So yeah, I guess carrying on from that, what like, I guess you kind of also do explain that, but what carried on the passion for you with books and with literature? Like, why are you a book blogger now? Like, what about that like has kept you in? What keeps your passion going for talking about books? Sorry, that's a really long question.
Talking about books. No. See, I guess to talk about the passion and the reason why, I will start from why I created the channel. I don't think I mentioned it when I was introducing myself, but I have a channel, Noria Reads. And when I was creating the channel, right, it was at a point when I was recovering from a severe bout of depression. I'd been depressed for about 2.5 years. And for that time, I was not reading. I did not find joy in the things that used to bring me joy, and reading had always brought me joy. But that period in my life, I was not doing any reading whatsoever. So I was just coming out of a depression. I was finding books again, and I was discovering all the books that had been released in all these many years when I was reading. But my friends, the ones that I talk to, that I read with, my best friend was in the UK getting a master's. I had another friend, but she was settling in because, she got married and she was settling in and everything. So the people I used to turn to talk about books with were no longer there. And I remember I was surfing YouTube one day. Sorry, excuse me. I was surfing YouTube one day and I saw Cindy, that's Read with Cindy's video, and she was talking about books. And it just hit me. I'm like, hold up. You mean there are people on YouTube who talk about books? I'm like, oh, I could do this. I could totally do this. So I created my channel as a of talking about the things that brought me joy. I also created the channel because I wanted to be a part of that community. Like I said, I was missing my friends, and I didn't really have friends around that time enjoyed and loved the same sort of things I did and the same type of books I did, because a lot of people around me that were like, oh, we love to read. And when you have that excitement and you want to talk about books, and then someone goes, oh, so what self-help book? I'm like, no, sorry. I might read a self-help book if I had to, but it's not the first book I reach for on my shelf. So it started from a need to build a relationship, to find other readers, to find a chosen family, right? And even with all the ups and downs and everything that comes with being a part of the community, I still love the fact that within this community, I have found a new set of friends, family, and home, and I've also found an outlet to talk about all I love. So yes, that's about it. And the books I hate.
That's really cool. And so, is there like book blogging or YouTube community? Is it quite a big community? Is everyone there for each other? Like, how do you interact with each other?
Oh, it is. It is quite a big community. It's funny because when you're joining or when you're on the outside looking in, you might not really know how big it is. And I even think that they are part of BookTube, and BookTube is the name coined for people that talk about books on YouTube, right? There are parts of BookTube that I have not even fully explored. It's wide. There are people like myself that talk about a lot of YA books and a lot of adult books. There are people that read primarily middle grade books. There are those that read nonfiction. There's a sub community for writers, and we do community based events. Right. So we have things like we hold readathons where people come together for a specific period of time usually say maybe a week or a month, and they come together, they read, have we have all sorts of events during that month or during that week, that period when you're reading. I think for you to be able to fully grasp just how big it is, like the community is, and I would now say the book community, which goes beyond just BookTube, right? The book community, you have book bloggers, you have people on books, you have bookstagrammers who take lovely aesthetic pictures and connect with people with books on Instagram. You have people on book Twitter, who tweet and have conversations and can run threads about books, analyzing them, or sometimes just gushing about them. You have book TikTok, which is yet another subset that is focused on TikTok, and they talk about books. So it is quite it's a huge community and very active. And sometimes you can feel lost because it is just that big, just that huge. But I think it's important because no matter how huge it is, you can find your niche, you can find your people. And that is something I think I've been able to do for myself. So I've been a part of the community, a larger bit of the community, but I've also been able to find my family, my core group. And as someone who is Nigerian, who understands like family is in two stages, there's the extended family that can have 20, 30 uncles and aunts and like almost 50 cousins and nieces, etc., etc. But then there's the nuclear part of the family, and that is the same thing with the book community. The larger community is like your extended family, and you do events and do stuff together. But when you find the friends and the family within it, it's closer and it's a bond, and that's it for me.
And I guess the power of it with literature as well is like, because you're reading things that you're all interested in, so you must have the same kind of like mentality or like thought processes if you're finding your community with these people, because it's like, oh, I like this book, blah blah, for this reason, and like, but it also like being able to talk to people who have different experiences with the same book and being able to like share those experiences in that kind of way. That's not like you're at uni or school where you're analysing it and like having to find what the author meant. You're taking your reading from it and sharing it with each other and being like, oh, I never thought of it that way, and that's how I've read it, and like there must be so much of that.
Yes, totally. And it's so much fun. I have like it's just there's this excitement that comes from being able to talk about, because a lot of times when people see especially when they hear, oh, you're reading, people think of it as like a chore. And I think it takes its roots from the way in which we've learned to interact with books in the education system. Oh, you have to analyze, you have to do things, you have to do this, you have to do that. And the thing about a community of fellow readers is that sometimes we just want to gush about a pretty cover. Sometimes we want to gush about favorite characters. Yes, we can do an analysis of these characters and what they personify, and what their strengths are and what character flaws are, etc., etc. But sometimes we just want to gush about these characters, and you can do that in this community. It's being able to do that. It's also being able to actively like have conversations with people like, I like this book and you do not like this book, and then we get into this argument and you're saying all the reasons why this book is the best book and I'm saying all the reasons why the book that does not work. But ultimately we both leave the table well aware of the fact that reading tastes are different at the same time, and that is perfectly fine. And you've just spent quite a significant amount of time talking with someone, even if it's an argument about it. And that is just awesome.
Yeah, I love that, like that respect you have for each other and that understanding when you're reading books, that like we might have two completely different like takes on this book, understandings or viewpoints on this book, but we can still have this conversation, we can still discuss it. And I think your viewpoint of even if you don't like it is as much as mine, because I do like it because we both read it. So, you didn't like it, that's fine, but then this is why, and that's just great, because I think that's something that's also lost and forgotten sometimes in the world, is people have different opinions, and different opinions can come from the root of like people feeling they're right and wrong and never seeing eye to eye. And it's like being able to like you said, have an argument or a discussion and be from different angles, but just so we have to have that conversation and then be able to walk away and be like, we're still friends, we're still getting on because that's not what the issue was here, but we can still coexist with knowing that we didn't have the same opinion on this book.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a perfect thing that you need in a community. It's great to see that there are those kind of spaces out there as well, which is really cool. One thing I wanted to quickly ask you, you kind of touched upon it a second ago-ish, but and obviously earlier you were saying that you like fantasy is kind of like where a lot of your favorite books are, and like you like fairy tales and all that kind of stuff. And for me, growing up in the UK in the West, a lot of that and those characters always are usually portrayed as white people. And as a black bi woman, how do you navigate that, like the fantasy, which often does seem very, very white?
Okay. Growing up for me, especially because I always make sure to point out the fact that my experiences are just a tad bit different because I am Black in a predominantly Black country. So if I step out, my neighbors are Black, everybody, my colleagues are Black. They don't even consider themselves Black in the sense that that's what they've always been, and that is where things slightly shift, because then I moved to books and I realized that a lot of books are heavily white, especially a lot of fantasy books are heavily white. And I've heard so much crap. People tell you all sorts of things like, oh my God, it's fantasy, it has to be real. I'm like, okay, so hold up, featuring a Black character in this book is unrealistic, but having a dragon is realistic. Like, make it make sense. So for me, it's been easier because I have been discovering like so many Black authors and so many authors of color have been writing books, I've been writing fantasy in the last decade. They are getting, and that's the reason why we say representation matters, but not just representation with regards being featured in the book, but representation with regards the authors telling the stories and people working in publishing as well, who are pushing to get the stories published, and I think that in the last decade, there has been an increase in the number of Black writers. There have been an increase in the numbers of authors of color. The number is still significantly less. Like if it is that it's almost like for every eight, like 8 out of 10 authors are going to, like published authors, especially traditionally published authors, are going to be white, and then you have 2 who are authors of color. So that needs to be done better. I think what has helped me, of course, like I said, is the fact that I have been reading amazing books. I just a couple of days ago, I just finished reading N.K. Jemisin's newest book, The City We Became, and it's a love letter to anybody that has lived in a city. I know a lot of love letter to New York, and I say yes, but it's also a love letter to anybody that has lived in a major city because you find it so relatable. I'm currently reading 2 YA books at the moment that are both written by Black authors. The first is Ray Biera by Jordan Feko, which will be getting released this month in August. And then I have an arc for the Gilded Ones by Namina Fona that is coming out next year. And being able to see these characters who, have the same hair texture as mine, who have the same skin color as mine, who are central to this story, not side characters. Amazing. And then that's another thing, because you also have to also consider the fact that, okay, now let's take it a step further and have this Black characters, this characters of color also be queer, so that I can find both parts and both aspects of my identity present in those books. And Gilded Ones has queer characters, and queer Black characters, and just seeing that is just making me grin from ear to ear. And all I just think is that there are so many teenagers, so many young Black people who would be reading that book, who will be picking it up, and who will see themselves represented in it. And that joy is it's indescribable. So for me, I would say how I've been able to navigate the space is to constantly push for more representation and when I do, it's the reason why when I see a book like Cinderella is Dead by Khalil Gibran is written by a Black author, is a retelling, a Cinderella retelling, and Cinderella in that book is gay as fuck, so she's so queer, and it makes me so happy. That is definitely a book I'm buying ASAP. So I guess it's for me to look for this representation in books, and also when I see them, to actually purchase, because publishing recognizes money. Money is power, and for them to continually like allow these stories, like publish these stories, we have to show them that it's not right that we have to tie our identity to the economy of it being beneficial to a publisher, but we go on strikes in order to let companies know that we do not approve certain decisions, and we do shopping bans in order to exert our powers on people. And I think that buying books by authors of color, buying books by Black authors is also my own way of stating that I want more of this, and I'm willing to put my money to ensure that more of stories like this continue to be made. Bonus points if they're Black queer authors. I just discovered a new author recently, River Solomon. I've not read any of their books yet, but I cannot wait because apparently they wrote The Deep, and they wrote An Unkindness of Ghosts. And I have heard friends say that River Solomon's writing, like their writing is phenomenal. It's the same thing with the writing of Akweke Emezi. Their story Pet is beautiful. I love their book Freshwater, and The Death of Vivek Oji is their newest book, and I've already bought it. It's already on its way to me. So I think for me, putting my money, and showing that it's what I want is my own way of demanding and expecting more publishers. And I think it's something that, we all can actively do. So yes.
I love that. Like it's not just about the representation within the books; it's also about the people writing the books too. And like I said, putting your money where your mouth is so important in those things. Like a lot of the time, as sucky as it is, it's the queer and the Black authors who need you to buy books, show publishers that they're worth investing in. And it's white authors get it easy, but actually we need to invest and actually showcase. And I love that you use your platform to actively talk about that and to actively push for people to read that and use your following to showcase like queer and Black writers. Yeah, and obviously it's quite important to you as well, and what you do. Are there a lot of people you like in your community? Are they similar to you in terms of that? Do you find, or do you find you have to educate them a lot and push for certain authors and writing within the community you have?
I think that the community, especially because a lot of people do not understand just how heteronormative the society we are in is, and I think society, when I say society, I mean a wider scope. And a lot of people do not also understand systemic racism and how it works, especially how it has permeated all aspects of life, especially and in particularly publishing. Because people do not understand the importance of stories. They do not understand that stories have always been a way in which society, especially governmental organizations and peoples with agenda, are found to push that agenda. They do it in all forms of media, including books we read, and people do not realize that. But I would say that of recent times, people have been like the communities, and when I say the communities, I mean those that exist outside of being people of color and people who are distinctly not straight and not cis in any way, because I think that that's something that a lot of people do not recognize, right? They do not see that, but they have started seeing it, and they have started demanding more and expecting more, and like we said, started putting their money where their mouth is and realizing just how much power purchasing power actually is. So I would say that in recent times, they have been educating themselves. They have been putting in that work. Could more work be done? Yes, but I also consider this not a one-time process, but something that you continue to work at and push at and finesse over a lifetime. So I would say that yes, they have been doing better, and I definitely hope that they continue to push that. So yes.
I think it's something that we live in a capitalist society. As much as we want to overturn that and change that, use your power that you have within capitalism to put your money into the right places and to the right people.
Yes.
Yes. So I love that a lot. And where do you get a lot of your books from? Do you use Amazon or other places? Like, how do you?
Unfortunately, I do use Amazon because getting books to Nigeria, unfortunately, it's the world's largest retail, like, book retailer. Of course, I know that they have done so many awful practices, and it's the reason why they have a monopoly. But I do that because indie bookstores are not an option for me because I do not live in those countries. So I work with Amazon. I also get stuff on Barnes and Noble. And if I see a store like an indie store that has online shipping, and can ship, I usually ship it to a friend who then brings it to me. That's usually how it works. But I think that's another thing that a lot of people, especially because I'm always we need to break the power of Amazon. We need to break the power of Jeff Bezos. But I think that a lot of people, for example, did you know that if you do not live within the US, Barnes and Noble does not accept like a payment platform for you. So unlike other, like with Amazon, I can use my Nigerian debit card, for example, and they will charge me in dollars on that card. But on Barnes and Noble, I have to use PayPal. And all I'm thinking is, what if you're in a country that does not use PayPal? That is not an option for you. Also, for Barnes and Noble, they don't ship outside of the US either. So I have to ship it to a friend who then brings it to me. And then there's the book depository, says they ship to all countries, but they do not ship to my country. Even though their website says we ship to countries. Lie. They do not ship to all countries. So that as well, I have to send to a friend to get to me. So I think the publishing industry, especially with regards the wider major publishers, they do not realize just how central they are and how fixated they are with the West, and they do not want to cater to people outside of that, and do not recognize the spending power that is available in all those countries that they are not even willing to consider, moving to. So for me, how I get my books, I get it on Amazon. If I'm buying it from sites that are not Amazon, I have to ship it to a friend and then have that friend ship it to me. So that's how it's been working. Logistics companies definitely help with that regard, even though the present one I use wonders if I'm about to open a bookshop because I keep shipping.
How many books do you get shipped to you a week?
I don't even do it weekly. I used to do it every 2 weeks, but ever since COVID, I have not been able to maintain my 2 weeks, but I do monthly. And on an average, because I buy a lot of books and I'll have friends who send me books. So I think about last month I got roughly 55 books. And then this month I got about 40 books. So I am definitely trying to do better. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed that I would. Probably. So on average, maybe some months 30 books, some months 50 books. I don't think I've ever exceeded that amount a month, but yes. Hi, Tasmin.
Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry. I just messaged the Camp YA Instagram. I was really troubled earlier, and I thought I'll just have a lie down beforehand, and I didn't set an alarm. I didn't think I was going to sleep that much. I hate myself. I'm so sorry. I hope you've all had a wonderful, wonderful time, and I can only apologise. I'm so sorry. Do you want me to just slip in or should I leave? What's best?
Okay. Oh, I think Darren. No, I don't think. I don't. Of course you can. Of course you can stay.
Yeah.
I was telling Darren. I was telling them that I also slept, like, because I slept at 12, like 2, and I was telling them that I had to set 5 separate alarms to make sure, because I know myself. I had to set them in like 5 minutes interval, so that I know that every 5 minutes something would buzz in me until I'm awake. Because I also know just how it is to catch a quick nap and then just oversleep. But
yeah, I was like, I'll just close my eyes for a few minutes, and my friend didn't know what time the
be
podcast.
able to get some rest there.
Oh, you both,
So,
regardless. Your hair, Darren, is amazing.
thanks. Did you want to just quickly introduce yourself, Taz?
Yeah,
just like you are. And
I'm Tasmin. My YouTube and Bookstagram are both Tea Books and Tasmin. I am pansexual. And I've been on BookTube. I think I've been on BookTube for 6 years, Bookstagram for 5, or the other way around. I can't actually remember. But I'm starting as of like lockdown. I was like, okay, this is like something to take seriously now. I read mostly. Unfortunately, I'm not reading as much YA as I used to, but I'm currently reading Cinderella is Dead, which I started yesterday, which is a
Alan Byron
female Cinderella kind of sequel retelling thing, and I'm absolutely loving it. But I read a lot of literature memoirs too.
Oh, awesome. And one question I just asked Noria was how many books do you read a week or / month?
I probably read about, it really depends. Sometimes if I'm like in a really good reading mood, say like in April during a readathon, I read 9 books, I think. And then recently I've only read like 3 books a month or something. Sometimes I'm myself now because of BookTube being like, come on, we've got to make content. But before I'd fully like, I try and push myself through slumps, because if I let the slump set in, I won't pick up a book for like 3 months. It's bad.
Was it a magical readathon that you participated in April?
Yeah, it was.
Awesome.
It was succeeded.
Awesome.
It was.
Yes. I guess, okay, I think I went on I did not hear Darren's question properly. My bad, because I didn't hear that you said how many books do I read. I thought you said how many books do I buy in a month. Okay, so how many books do I read in a month? It varies actually. I think just like Tamsin, I read off and on. And it's funny because this year has been not so good. I won't say not so good reading wise, but I have been reading. My reading has been all over the place this year. There was a month when I read only 1 book in the month, and then in April I read 12 books in April, which I thought was like, yay, I'm coming back, because prior to that I do average between 9 and 15 books a month before. But then last month I only read 5 books, even though I started 10 books. So yeah, I carried over 5 books. I carried over 5 books into August. So there is that. But if I was to say presently this year, I average between 6 to 9 books a month.
Good. That's good. I try and up my count.
I wish
novels and things.
I wish I was like that. Like back at uni, I used to be like all the time and I was constantly reading books. And some of those things, when you fall out of it, it's so hard to get back into reading quite constantly and reading like so much. So one question I'm going to ask you both quickly now as well is, oh my God, it's just literally gone out of my head. So I'm going to change the question completely. So obviously last year was the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots, which was kind of seen as the modern catalyst for the LGBT rights movement, very much in the West and like, global North. I wouldn't say that's a global thing. What are your hopes for the next 50 years in LGBT rights specifically? And I'll ask another question in a minute to make it more book focused. But
I don't know in terms of riots. I think like maybe in terms of like the I've only been to the Gay Pride Parade in London. What I would like is for it to be less capitalist and for companies that whack a rainbow on things to actually support us as a community, as opposed to just thinking, oh, we can make money off of them for a month. Obviously for more acceptance generally in day-to-day life, maybe for things to be pushed more in schools. I can't remember where it was recently. Oh, I heard something on the news somewhere in like Europe that, oh, was it Scotland? I don't remember. Somewhere that gay relationships is now obligatory to be taught in primary schools, which is just how terrible that we're in 2020 and that's still something that we have to campaign for. I think for kids to be exposed to it more, exposed to all things diverse, like people with disabilities, like the younger you are aware of things like that, then the less kind of other it is as you get older.
Okay. I think I do agree. I do. 50 years would be awesome. To have that started really early. Tamsin, before you joined, I was explaining to Darren and Kay. In fact, I did not realize that I was queer and I was bisexual, and I was definitely not straight on way later, because I brushed off all my experiences as, oh, everybody does that. I'm like, nope, straight people do not do that. It took me a while to realize that. But I think for me, my dream 50 years from now would be a world where it will not be legal to be gay, to be a part of the community, because I live in a country where my identity is illegal. They will tell you that, oh, of course, it's not illegal to be gay in Nigeria, but it's just illegal for you to act on it in any way. So we're all meant to be monks. So it would be awesome in 50 years because I see India, India is passing passed on the law, and now, you have gay marriage. Uganda has decriminalized, and I just see these countries, I see all this progress being made, and I want that for every single country in this world, for people with identity like ours to be able to live their lives free, because that's the core of Stonewall, a pushback against a system that would seek to oppress us just based on who we are. And it would be awesome if in 50 years, journey that started with that people are here, we are where we exist, and we are not going anywhere. If that, becomes something global, and countries all over the world, like citizens and queer people all over the world are able to enjoy that. So that for me would be the absolute height and dream in 50 years. It would be awesome.
I used to work at an LGBT plus charity called Kaleidoscope Trust, and they work in like Commonwealth countries trying to get decrim. And it was always that understanding, like, we can fight to get decrim, but it's also another fight of changing society's pressure as well, society's ideas. Like, it's great you can change, can make it legal, but if people don't feel comfortable to be out in their countries, or they can still get beaten up walking down the streets, actually there's more to do than just decrim as well, which I think is very important, which you kind of touched on there as well. Covering off as well a little bit. I'm sure there's probably a lot of young people watching. Are there any young authors or books that you could recommend any like young people to read that maybe either helped you or inspired you, or even now that you're reading that you think are really cool?
The first one that comes to my mind that I recommend to absolutely everybody, regardless of anything, is, it's not a young adult, but I feel like everyone should read it. It's Why Be Happy When You Could Be Normal, the memoir by Jeanette Winterson. She is a lesbian icon. Her most famous book is Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, which she wrote when she was in her early 20s. And it's sort of semi-autobiographical, inspired by her childhood. But then Why Be Happy is the complete truth. what was interesting was I read the memoir and then I read Oranges, and seeing what she, at the age of 20, let of herself slide onto the page was so interesting. But so she was adopted as a baby into a very, very religious family and was raised to work in the church, to follow in her family's footsteps. And then when she was about 16, she realized that she liked girls, and her parents were like, nah, not gonna happen. And the title, Why Be Happy When You Could Be Normal, is what her mum said to her when she said that her girlfriend makes her happy. And that just, when the book came out, I think I was figuring out my sexuality. I was about like 15 or so. I didn't read it then, but I just heard the title and that kind of background behind it, and I was like, me, oh my goodness, I relate. And it's so beautifully written. So anyone that, yeah, I was gonna say anyone that's figuring out their identity, anyone, just everyone needs to read that book. But then more for a YA audience, the first 2 young adult female books that I read when I was a teenager were Ask the Passengers by A.S. King and Everything Leads to You by Nina LaCour. And they both just blew my mind. I think I read them when I was about 15, 16. And they're both about, well, no, Ask the Passengers is about a girl figuring out that she likes women. And then the other one is about a girl who is out. And that one isn't about coming to terms with her sexuality. That one, Everything Leads to You, is about, it's almost like an adventure story. They're like, oh, we found this mystery, we need to go save it. And there also happens to be a female romance, and it's beautiful. Both of them, all of them.
Nice. So I think for me, I'm going to do what I do. I'm going to make it okay. So I'm just going to rat things out. Firstly, the non-YA books. I would suggest Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. It is adult fantasy. It is quite a big book. It takes a lot of people say it takes a while to get into, but I personally have a specific taste. And when the book started in like by page 20, and you saw this badass girl drop down from a ceiling and kill an assassin, and then like climb back up the ceiling, and nobody knew, and the assassin was dead, I was just like, yo, I'm in love with Ed. I want to marry Ed. So that had what? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I keep forgetting that book's queer, so thank you for reminding me.
Oh yes. Oh yes. So there is that. I would say if it is adult but not fantasy, I would suggest The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I think that the character is fascinating. She's bisexual. She's an icon. She's a movie star who is telling us about her life, and she did have several, but she had one, and I think it's central to show this bisexual woman in all her glory, to show that she doesn't, because a lot of the time when we're like reading about queer stories, you always have it very sanitized. You have to be a good person if you're gay, you can't afford to be selfish and nasty and mean, because then people say, oh no, but like, she is not your hero. She's just the hero of her own story, and she does do interesting, outrageous, very terrible things, but it's to survive, and you get that. And she's also bisexual, and there's just this bit of biphobia that she tackles with the woman that she loves that I just love. I love that scene. So Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. If we go to YA, right? YA fantasy, sapphic fantasy, I would say The Weight of the Stars by Kay Ancrum, by Kayla. Have to love space and who loves stars, and they bond over that, and just watching them fall in love over the course of the book was just absolutely beautiful. So The Weight of the Stars. For boys, I would say I know a lot of people not like it, but it's so weird because there was a period when everybody loved it, and then now not many people. I would say Raven Cycle. Sorry, I am a huge fan of Ronan Lynch. Ronan Lynch is the love of my life. I would die for that boy. So if if you like books that center Welsh kings and discovering powers and discovering magic and just this found family and friendship, then I would say Pick Up the Raving Cycles by Maggie Stiefvater. And of course, the book I mentioned starting, the one that got me on this journey, City of Bones. Yes, it is very tropey, very, very tropey, and very typical mid-2000s YA. But if you're young and you're trying to figure out yourself and trying to get into reading, it's very easy to get into. And if you don't like the Mortal Instrument series, it's a great landing pad because there are so many other series in that universe that you might enjoy. My personal favorite is the Dark Arts Devices, but and I have a friend whose favorite is the Infernal Devices. So there are so many books you can read in that world. So I can go on about rendition, as you can see. So I'm going to just stop here and be like, okay, that is okay.
I think that is. We are coming up for an hour now. So if you both want to quickly just say where people can follow you and find out more about what you do and watch your videos and stuff. Do you just quickly do that? No. Oh my God, Nora, do you want to go first? Maria? Sorry.
Okay. So you can find me on YouTube at Noria Reads. That's Noria, then Reads, one word. I'm Instagram, but they're Reader on Twitter. So Noria Reads on YouTube, Instagram, and Goodreads, and then Noria the Reader on Twitter. So yeah.
And I am T-Books and Tasmin. That's Tazmyn. Apologies for that confusing name. T-Books and Tasmin on YouTube and Instagram, and just Tasmin May on Twitter.
Awesome, and thank you both for this great chat. It's been really, really cool. I'm sure we'll connect again too.
I'm so
It's fine.
sorry.
Don't forget to. Cool. Obviously, it's not happening on Camp YA for the rest of the day and tomorrow, so keep in for that.
Yeah.
And don't forget to follow us on FOFU Podcast, Instagram, and Twitter. So thanks.
Thank you.
It's lovely chatting
Thank
to you
you.
both as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
For having us.